So I'm going to get started. Everyone, good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday morning. It's actually Wednesday morning for us. We're over here in the Bay Area in California. I'm Nicole Kim, Product Line Marketing Manager with vCloud Air. And today's Google Hangout topic is on our disaster recovery solutions from vCloud Air, as well as from our Horizon Air team. So today's Hangout is a great opportunity for all of you out there to hear from our current vCloud Air disaster recovery customers. We have 3 highlighted customers today, so we're really fortunate to have them with us, and they're going to talk to you about some of the challenges that their organizations have faced that led them to pursue a cloud-based disaster recovery service. And we'll get into also, what factors led them to their final decision in selecting vCloud Air Disaster Recovery. So they're going to talk to you about their experiences to date, the benefits that they've already realized, how using a cloud-based solution has opened up their perspectives and strategic direction that they're taking overall with their IT groups. We also have some of our veteran subject matter experts from the vCloud Air team readily available, as well as our Horizon Air team, to answer questions that you may have regarding DR overall from our cloud-based solutions from VMware. So this morning's Hangout is meant to be fairly casual. Our main objective is to have you all walk away having learned a bit more about VMware's cloud-based DR solutions, from vCloud Air and Horizon Air. It's an opportunity for you to hear from our customers directly, as well as to be able to, all of you to ask your top-of-mind questions. You can ask them to our customers directly or the technical architect from our team. So before we kick things off, let's take a minute to go through all the resources that we have on hand this morning. From the vCloud Air team and Horizon Air team, I'll have our technical architects and product marketing manager go through, introduce themselves. If you guys can state your name, how many years you've been with VMware, what your area of expertise is with vCloud Air and Horizon Air, and I want one fun fact from you guys. So why don't you guys let the group know what your, either you have a choice, all-time favorite movie or band is. So Mike, I'll pass it off to you. You can go first.
Sure, as I unmute my line here. Hey everybody, I'm Mike Roy. I'm the Senior Technical Marketing Manager here on the vCloud Air team. I've been with VMware since 2009. I currently focus on all things around security, which has a bit of a tie into networking. I also kind of previously did a little management and migration stuff. Interesting tidbit about me. Favorite band, I'd say, I don't know, it's a bit of a toss-up. I like electronic music, but I'm also a guitarist, so for me it's like a toss-up between like Deadmau5 and Tool. But favorite movie of all time, Fifth Element, all the way.
Oh, he went above and beyond and answered both questions. It was an either-or, but thank you, Mike, for that. And I'll pass it on to Josue.
I'm Josue Fontanez. I run product marketing for Horizon Air. So Horizon Air covers a variety of different services. It's the desktop as a service that we sell to customers. We also sell hosted apps using Microsoft RDS infrastructure in the background. And then for purposes of this discussion, also we have Desktop DR, which is a new service that we announced in November of last year. So I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more about that. In fact, if we want to take over this Google Hangout and just talk about Desktop DR, that would be perfectly fine with me. In terms of movies, I would probably say my all-time favorite, probably Princess Bride. I'm a big Princess Bride fan, so I would say that's my all-time favorite.
All right, we'll take it. So thanks, guys. And then I'm going to introduce you guys to our customers. So today we have the privilege to speak with Transact Payment Systems. They are a full-service solution provider to the scrap industry. They provide sophisticated software that enables efficient operations around things like yard management, transaction imaging, secure payments, and ticketing system. And then we also have the Hut Group joining us. The Hut Group is the UK's leading multi-website online retailer with a product range that includes things like health and beauty, sports nutrition, to fashion and entertainment and gifting. So kicking off with Transact Payment Systems, can you please introduce your name, title, how long you've been in the industry, what your role entails within your organization today. And why don't you tell us where you're joining us from?
Yeah, Paul Colby with Transact Payment Systems. I'm the IT manager. I'm joining you from St. Petersburg, Florida. I've been in the industry for 15 years, been with VMware for 5 at Transact.
And where are you joining us from?
St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yes, okay, sorry. Blank there. And I'm going to pass it on to the Hut Group.
Hi there, my name is Skalk van der Merwe. I'm the IT director here at the Hut Group. I've been with them for just under a year now. I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I worked with VMware for at least half of that. And I'm joining you from the UK and Cheshire, which is awfully cloudy today.
Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Why don't we kick off with Paul, and can you talk to us about Transact Payment System? So what was going on that triggered you to actively look for a DR solution? Did you already have something in place? Were you looking for something that was cloud-based? Was that a part of your criteria? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I joined Transact in 2010, and obviously in Florida we have the luxury of having hurricanes every season. So DR is key. We have customers across the country, and no matter what happens here in Florida, we need to be able to keep them in business. So in 2010, we implemented a disaster recovery site in San Antonio, and that took about over a year and a half. And we started hosting customer data along with our PCI business, and we had to keep those segregated. So in 2014, we set out looking for disaster recovery for that segment of our business. And in the Q4, we decided to implement vCloud Air, and by Q1 of 2015, we had it implemented.
Great. So you mentioned that, so in terms of, what are some of the critical apps that kind of drove you to look for this additional DR?
Well, a critical app is scrap buying software. So if they can't buy materials from their customers, then they're pretty much dead in the water.
Okay. Have you guys actually ever experienced an outage? Just curious.
No, we've done one test failover, and in 2010, I kind of had the dream that we'd be able to fail over to San Antonio, and some of the limitations with the 50 meg pipe between the two data centers. You had to have like 15 milliseconds of latency, and we were over that, but it was pretty neat to fail that first VM over into your Las Vegas data center, and just seamless, with a click of a button.
That's great. How about you, Skull? Can you talk to us about the Hut Group in terms of, what has been your experience to date, starting with initial exploration to your purchasing, deployment, your use of the service today? Can you just give us some highlights of your experiences?
Yeah, sure. I think I was fortunate just before I joined the Hut that I was at the VCHS launch in Europe, and I had a conversation with one or two of the presenters there who told me that they were bringing out the vCloud Air DR as a service offering, and at that point in time, I'd already decided to join the Hut, and I knew that one of the problems they faced was the complete and utter lack of having a DR setup. So my first task after I joined was to ensure that we have something here that we can trust reliably. But we also had to get there very fast. The company is growing and is very acquisitive, which means that every day that we don't have DR, the risk continue to grow. So after having a conversation and looking at the offering, I had to look at what we could do in as short a space of time to bring DR to the Hut. It didn't take us long to understand that the cost difference between doing it yourself and trying to do it with vCloud Air was really something that was attractive to us. And it took us very similar to Paul's timeline. It only took us about 6 months from the day I joined to the day that we were able to stand up and test a fully functioning website. We never failed over production to it, but we were able to replicate the full production database, the full production website. We were able to navigate through it, through checkout, and place test orders. And to be able to do that within 6 months of joining a new company, I think it, one, made me feel very good, but I think it really gave the executives the comfort that they knew that we now had a solution which would be useful and known when we came to have a disaster. And luckily, so far, we haven't had it.
That's great. You know, something that's I know I've heard a lot from customers and just prospects, and was around the cloud-based component. You know, Paul, can you talk to me about, you know, was there any hesitation in terms of when you were assessing the various options that you had on hand that this was a cloud-based solution? And are you guys already doing some, you know, any kind of live VMs hosted out or doing any kind of test dev in cloud, so like you were comfortable, or was this totally net new for Transact Payment?
Yeah, it was completely new. When I started, we had some things out in the cloud, and that was one of the big pushes from management, is they wanted to get that stuff back into our private data center, and that's the biggest challenge. I always tell people, if you're going to put something in the cloud, better have a plan to get it back. And you know, the disaster recovery is really a no-brainer. I mean, it's not like you're living with your data out there, you can't get it back, or if we had to stop this service that, you know, we wouldn't be able to stay in business. You know, it's literally that. And you know, like Schalk said, I'm very, very fortunate that it's one of those services you're glad to have, but you hope you never have to use. So I mean, because that's really what it is for Transact. It's a disaster. I mean, we've been hit by a hurricane. We're not going to be back up. Our building won't be rebuilt for 6 months. I mean, and I've seen it in 2004. You know, it was actually my first year down here in Florida, and you know, driving down to South Florida to some offices. This was at a Fortune 500 company, but you know, and you're looking at telephone poles knocked over and buildings damaged, and so the threat is real here. So just fortunate we haven't had to use it.
Yeah, when you, I'm assuming you looked at other offerings and vendors and such, and I wanted to talk to you about that, the ease of moving the VMs back and forth. You know, was that high priority criteria? You know, we hear about customers that are looking at, you know, the other vendors, and sometimes I feel like it's not top of mind, but it's something that I wonder, like, you know, hey, when you power on your VM during a failover, you need it to be exactly the way that you had seen it on premises. So when they're putting it in other type of non-vSphere based environments, I just wonder, like, did that bubble up as a priority?
Yeah, we use Acronis, and we use that for some of our PCI stuff for failing over between the two data centers. But you know, you always like to keep the same horses in the stable. And with VMware having it built in and the ease of use, like you said, the process for me to fail over with Acronis is tenfold of that of VMware.
Okay. Hey, Scott, can you talk to us about some of the aspects of the service, like, you know, the recovery point objective? You know, how often, you know, are you guys, or did you have as a requirement the need to replicate, or, you know, were there any particular features that were critical for you to have in a DR solution?
Yeah, it's one of the key things that I enjoyed when I looked at the solution, that you could set these recovery points. The real benefit is what I'm seeing right now, and I'm spending some time with the infrastructure teams more often than I probably should at the moment, but we are actively managing the bandwidth that we had between us and the vCloud Air DC. And what we found is that initially we thought that an RPO that we had to set was 4 hours and 4 hours only, but we very soon realized that actually you could manage this in the portal and only send over the data that you really have to send at that point in time. Some things you initially set out to replicate at 4 hour intervals because you believed initially that they have to be as real time as you would like them to be. But very soon we realized there's only a handful of these which has different sets of data that we have to replicate. So to be honest, what we found is not only the stuff that we started off that we had a great toolkit that we can play with, but now we can see how we can better manage, and instead of having to up the bandwidth to gig links and whatnot, we're able to set that and manage the current infrastructure we have in a much more seamless manner than we would have been able to do before.
Oh, wow, that's good to hear. Paul, what about in terms of, can you talk about the ease of actual deployment and use in terms of, was it a high learning curve for your IT staff to adopt this DR solution, or what did you see?
Yeah, I mean, we're a small shop. I mean, it's pretty much I deployed this. I mean, I got to take that back. VMware really did it. I mean, the process was so smooth. The handout they sent me to go through was clear to read. A drive showed up. I basically gave them an IP address. They put it on that device. I put it on my network, replicated everything over to it, and shipped it out. We did have one hiccup where they weren't able to convert those VMs at your data center. Sent me another one. It was a week and a half, and that was really the only hiccup. And they walked me through it. I mean, and I think that it goes back to your other question on Acronis or this. Having it all in house, all one shop, one place, just made the deployment.
Yeah.
Seamless.
So you were already a vSphere vCenter user. So in terms of having to, there was no new tool set or console that you hadn't seen necessarily, except for the vCloud Air console, of course.
Yeah, the vCloud Air console was really the only thing to learn, and
that's pretty intuitive, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
A couple of progress bars and such, and resources available, right?
Yep. And then I had to deploy the OVFs that do the replication. But if you've deployed any OVF, you can deploy the vCloud Air OVFs.
Yep. Skulk, how about, can you talk to us about, in terms of your, for example, the support you've received to date with the service, and so when you first got going, or if you had any, when you were dealing with some of the bandwidth kind of issues that you were trying to nail down. Can you talk to us about the support? Since and also you've been working with VMware, so did you see any differences, or?
I think the support was first rate that we had. The timelines we were working to were tight. I knew it could be done, but we had a few hiccups. We started really early in the vCloud Air journey alongside VMware, but we also realized that it was probably going to be better if we asked for some professional services from some of the partners. So we used a partner here, a single resource, but when we got stuck, VMware opened up an additional line to us where we were able to have conversations with the guys in Palo Alto, almost was it afternoon calls where we were with the VMware guys, and they were really helpful to get us over the line. All the issues we faced were real. They weren't necessarily major showstoppers, but they really assisted us to get to the point where we could demonstrate the successes that we had reached.
That's great. In terms of, can you talk to us about the Hut Group's overall cloud journey to date then? Was this your first foray, and are you maybe looking into delving further into, operationally via the cloud, or?
Yeah, indeed. I've spoken to a number of people at VMware on what we can do more with the hybrid cloud strategy and so forth, and I'm fully bought into that. But I'm also bought into a multi-cloud strategy for whatever we're going to do. I firmly believe that there's never a question of one or the other. I do believe you need to have more than one. I don't like to have all the eggs in one basket. But with VMware specifically, we have, subsequent to the vCloud Air move, moved into using the hybrid clouds. We've extended what we have on-premise in our development environment. We're now running about 6 or 7 DevOps style clouds. One of our marketplace offerings has now got all their applications running in their cloud. It turns out they loved it so much that they are now 3 to 4x more heavily utilized than we ever envisioned they would be.
Wow.
And they are actively using it by spinning VMs up and down, writing iOS apps and so forth. And there's no ways we would have been able to spin up the environments that they needed in the time frames had we done it ourselves.
Oh, great. What about you, Paul? In terms of cloud endeavors for Transact Payment System?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Our pride and joy is kind of the private ATM network, so that's one thing that I don't think management wants to move to the cloud anytime soon. So I'm probably not good to speak on that.
Okay, yeah. In terms of, but thus far, you stuck your toe in the water. So you've got a cloud-based DR solution that you've got. So, in terms of the level of comfort that your management has, with that, would you say that their level of confidence is pretty high, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the vCloud Air was a game changer because for me as the IT manager, I mean, my life would be a lot simpler if we put things in the cloud. I don't have to worry about when my HP servers crash. But um, so no, I kind of I'd push for it, and kind of got pushback. But I got on the phone with some of your VMware team, and they kind of went over it, and I still remember the look on the manager's face when he's like, "Wow, that's pretty good." Like, you can't beat it. I mean, do you want to go buy another $80,000 HP blade, or do you want to, be able to put it up in the cloud and not worry about it?
Yeah, well, it sounds like does it help that it was a change from a CapEx to an OpEx spending for your organization? You're
Uh,
not investing in like you said into an actual, hardware devices, things that ultimately need upgrading and maintenance and such. And
yeah, I mean, I think there was the feeling of the expense, but um, to be able to get something like that done in, 2 quarters is, you can't do it. You can't do it on an on-premise.
yeah, no, definitely. Scott, how about for you guys? Was cost a factor? Like when you were looking across, multiple vendors and such, was that a factor that stood out for you guys?
100%, yeah, it always is. The one that I ended up going down the road of really looking at what is the major benefit to us, and that was really the build it yourself versus trying to use the cloud. Um, Whether or not different cloud providers could do this cheaper is a different topic, and it's difficult in and of itself. But my major factor choosing on the finance side was really looking at what it would cost me to do it myself and what it would have cost to do it as an OpEx model. Um, the way we ended or where we ended up was that we were at least 4 to 5x cheaper to do it on the cloud than we were to buy it yourself. I used numbers that they used previously 3, 4 years ago when they built their own DC, and it was staggering to see the cost savings that you could get, and that is ignoring the time and resource effort that you would have had to factor in as well. So on a purely buy it, get it ready, start using it model, it was cheaper.
Oh, great. What about, this is my last area, and then I want to, again, I want to give the folks who have joined us an opportunity to talk with you guys as well and ask their questions. But I wanted to just ask one last question in terms of geolocation. Was that a priority, Paul, for you guys to be a certain distance away from your main on-premises environment, or to be certain, close to you guys, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, you don't have to worry about hurricanes in Las Vegas, so um,
Yep.
you can't really think of a better place in America to put a data center. So unfortunately, since we're down here in the southeast and have to deal with the hurricanes, we like our DR out in Las Vegas. So yeah.
Okay, good. So that was a selection criteria for you to be further out from you guys. Because I know some customers like to have their facilities close enough for them to be able to visit as well. So Skulk, with the Hut Group, again, was that, are you looking to maybe further expand away from the UK, or, did you want to keep it within?
For this specific decision, the location was paramount. I was asked numerous times, where is my data going to be? Whilst we're never going to go and visit the area, it was good to know that it was located in the UK. Many of our customers require that. We do supply third-party sites as well. And for those, we categorically have to keep the data locally and in the UK. So it was very fortuitous for VMware to open up the DC here in Slough.
That's great. So it's about half after the hour. I wanted to open it up for some questions for the customers as well as for our team. We've actually had somebody new join us, so we're going to put him on the spot. Hello, David. What I'm going to ask you is to introduce yourself. Can you state your full name? Oh, David, you're on mute. Can you tell us how many years you've been with VMware, your area of expertise within vCloud Air, and one fun fact in terms of letting us know what your all-time favorite movie or band is?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's David Hill. I'm a senior technical marketing architect for vCloud Air. I also have my son knocking on my office door to try and get in, so if you hear lots of banging, that's him. My key areas of focus in vCloud Air are disaster recovery, storage, and availability. I've been with VMware for, it'll be 5 years next month, and my all-time favorite movie would have to be the Back to the Future trilogies.
You're waiting for that hoverboard to come out. I know.
And the power laces. That's what I want.
The flux capacitor. We all know. So
I'll take the self-drying jacket personally.
Before we move on, actually, to open up to questions, let's just do a quick recap, for the folks. I'm sure we have a broad spectrum of folks that have joined us for the Hangout today. So I'm just going to do a quick recap of vCloud Air disaster recovery. Since, we've been talking about it, some of you may or may not be so familiar with what it's all about. And I also want to have my colleague Josue talk about Horizon Air's desktop DR solution. Again, another cloud-based DR solution from VMware. So in terms of vCloud Air disaster recovery, pretty simple. It's a asynchronous replication failover, failback solution for specifically vSphere-based environments. It comes packaged with a base amount of resources to support replicated VMs with a warm standby compute, which is readily available for use during a failover or even just for testing. Testing is unlimited in quantity for this subscription-based service. It comes with term lengths as low as 1 to 3 months and goes up 12, 24, 36 months. As we were talking about with the HUD group, with Skulk, recovery point objective settings are customizable per the customer's needs. It can go as low as 15 minutes and all the way up to 24 hours. We did actually just have a new release of our service as of last week, which we introduced actually a few new features. I'm going to put David, our technical marketing manager, on the spot to kind of do a quick recap on the new highlights that we just released last week.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole.
You're welcome.
So yeah, the key 3 main features for our enhanced disaster recovery offering that we released last week. The first major one is native failback. So built into the vSphere replication appliance is the ability to now replicate your virtual machines from vCloud Air to your on-premises environment. So whereas before doing failback was with vCloud Connector, you now have the ability to replicate from your vSphere environment to the cloud and also replicate back from the cloud to vSphere. So it's very, very easy to set up. It uses the same workflows. It uses the vSphere replication appliance. So everyone that's familiar with that product can very easily just replicate to and from the cloud. Another key feature is multi-point in time recovery. And this allows us to specify how many essentially restore points we want to go back in time in the event of a failure. So if you think about when you do your replications and how you set your RPOs, say you have a 24-hour RPO set, you have the ability to set up to 24 multi-point in time recovery points. Muddle the words up there. And that allows you to essentially go back to previous replication points and recover from those. So if you think about when you're doing your replication, if your data center was about to go up or went up in smoke in the middle of a replication, that replication may not complete and potentially could corrupt that replication delta out in the cloud. So the ability to recover from previous replication points gives you that peace of mind that in the event of a failure, you can go back to previous times. Also, if you think not just about the fact that your data center's gone up in smoke, but maybe you just want to fail over a particular virtual machine from a maintenance perspective, you also have the ability to fail over that virtual machine in the event that you've, I don't know, installed a patch and corrupted that virtual machine. and you just want to fail over and get it running very quickly, you can use those multiple point-in-time recoveries to do that. And then the final key new feature is in the form of automation using vRealize Orchestrator, which was formerly known as vCenter Orchestrator. So it's a free product that comes bundled with vCenter and allows you to build workflows using plugins that tie into VMware's products and also third-party products and create automation solutions. So if you think from a disaster recovery perspective, you can actually automate end-to-end the full failover solution. So if you think about what you can do with this plugin, you can actually configure it to use. So when you deploy a virtual machine to a particular folder, for example in vCenter, then it can actually detect that virtual machine, configure the replication to the cloud, and then in the event of a failure, it can actually power on your virtual machines in particular startup orders. So it's very, very flexible when you're looking at creating automation solutions around disaster recovery.
That's great.
I also have to add, it's very strange talking to myself in the computer screen.
At least you can keep check on yourself. That's a great recap. You know, these new features went live as of last week, Monday. And then I wanted to give the spotlight over to Josue to talk a little bit about, you know, what is desktop DR? What does that entail from VMware?
Yeah, you know, it was really good hearing from, you know, some of the customers like Paul and Schalk that are using vCloud Air DR, and it really resonates with some of the stuff that we're hearing. You know, everyone is really trying to get prepared for a disaster. It doesn't mean that they've already had one, but, you know, years back we kind of thought, hey, the only folks that really care about DR are like your e-commerce type customers, those that require kind of a what I call an always-on business. But the reality is whether you're a small customer, whether you're a large customer, you don't have the luxury of losing any time to transact business. So what that means is, you know, when you're talking about, you know, whether you're in Florida or whether you're in an area that doesn't experience natural disasters, we find that all customers are really trying to think about if there were to be a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. Really the key focus is, can my workforce continue to work? And from a desktop DR perspective, that's where we're really trying to provide some value. You know, that point at which, let's say, a hurricane hits in Florida, and you know you have trees down, people have, let's say, you know, tried to leave their homes. Can they continue to work and really transact business in a realistic time frame? So desktop DR is really around solving kind of that use case. It's about saying, you know, can I provide a cloud-hosted desktop? And many of our customers on the line have heard of desktop as a service. Well, this is really desktop as a service, but kind of a different kind of spin on it. Think of desktop as a service for this particular use case as really around providing an emergency desktop to your end users in the event of a disaster. So it's not really a cloud-hosted desktop that's used 24/7. It's really for that emergency use case where, you know, a natural or man-made disaster has hit, your end users have lost access to their laptops, or perhaps they weren't provided a laptop, and now they need to continue to work. So customers can come to us and say, hey, I want these, you know, let's say 100 cloud-hosted desktops. I have these critical end users that I want to make sure that regardless of any type of disaster, they can continue to work. So for a very nominal fee, you know, dramatically lower than a always-on kind of cloud-hosted desktop, they can provide these emergency desktops to their end users. And you know, it's really nice because as part of kind of the onboarding process of Horizon Air Desktop DR, the customer is going to do a couple of different things. Number one, they're going to integrate their cloud environment to their infrastructure. So what that means is, you know, these cloud-hosted desktops would have network connectivity back to their data center, would be part of their AD environment. It would be their own corporate image installed on these cloud-hosted desktops. So for all intents and purposes, these cloud-hosted desktops look like any other Windows desktop that's part of their Active Directory infrastructure. So they can manage them, they can secure them, patch them, update them, etc. So in the event of a disaster, this emergency desktop that you provide to your end users, let's say it's your Salesforce, it's going to look like any other Windows desktop that you've deployed in your environment. And then, really it's intended to be used just in that event of a disaster. So if that disaster, period lasts 7 days, okay, you use it for 7 days, and then you call VMware and say, hey, I'm done. And they go, what we call back into a reservation mode. So they're basically sitting on standby again. And we find that, some of the customers that we've been talking to, we've seen really customers across the board, whether it be, we have a baseball team in the U.S. that's decided to use desktop DR. We have manufacturing organizations, we have financial services organizations, really verticals across the board. And what they're really looking for is kind of the peace of mind to be able to say, hey, I have a solution so that my workforce can continue to work. Hopefully I never have to use it, but they can use it. So that's really kind of where desktop DR kind of fits into the picture. And the last thing I'll mention is, when I look at the customers that we have for Horizon Air Desktop DR, I would say the biggest theme that we're seeing is they love the fact that I can go to VMware, buy, call it infrastructure DR with vCloud Air, and a DR solution for my workforce. And in fact, I could then put that solution in a single data center. So I could go to Las Vegas and say, hey, my infrastructure stuff is there, and my emergency cloud-hosted desktops are there. In the event of a really bad disaster, my apps that I've replicated, my VMs that I've replicated, are in the same data center as these cloud-hosted desktops. So I can kind of take advantage of some value there. So really that's what we're seeing from the DR space, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have on that.
That was great. Thanks, Josue, for the overview on that. Really a great complimentary story overall for disaster recovery from VMware, especially from a cloud basis. So, at this time, I want to, again, another, major objective for us today in the Hangouts is to give you guys an opportunity, a direct line to our in-house experts that we have here today, as well as our customers, our current customers for vCloud Air Disaster Recovery. So I wanted to see if there were any questions from all of you that are watching us today. Between David and Mike, as well as Josue, what are some of the most common questions that you are fielding when you're talking to prospects, customers, and such, and talking to them about our cloud-based DR solutions? Mike,
I'll start off. From my perspective, I tend to focus a lot on security, so what we hear a lot of questions are on tend to be around compliance, networking constructs, like how am I going to be able to connect in the event of a failover, how do I access my workloads, how do my end users access services, and one of the nice things about the DR service is you can kind of architect a lot of this stuff beforehand, so you kind of design like, hey, this is what my failover state's going to look like, and that can include networking, and that can include security policies and whatnot. And the nice thing is, in the case where folks have like regulatory requirements, where they're bound by things like HIPAA, and other types of regulatory needs that they have, our DR service banks off of the facilities that we run vCloud Air in, which are, very well certified. So we have like our SOC, our ISO, PCI is very close. We're on the way with that. CSA stars up in there. So not only is it a good, robust solution, but it's a secure one, and it's one that folks can really rely on because we've done a lot of due diligence to make sure that the platform as well as the services remain available and remain secure and private for your tenant environment there.
That's great. What about Josue from Desktop DR? What are some of kind of the top 1 or 2 concerns or questions that you field from customers?
Yeah, I would probably say if someone's pretty familiar with infrastructure DR, they want to really kind of think about them the same way, but they are actually quite different. With infrastructure DR, you want as tight an SLA as possible in terms of, RPOs. or an RTO. So what that means is, there really should be no delay, especially if it's a critical app, between, kind of availability. With workforce DR, or desktop DR as we call it, it's quite different, in the sense that, when you really think about that disaster, disaster hits, and, sorry, Paul, that I keep on referring to Florida. It's just I've had that experience. I was there when Hurricane Andrew hit, so I know how it feels. But when you think about DR, let's say that hurricane hits in Florida, most of us, if we live there, I mean, how soon would we get back to work? The reality is your end users are thinking about their homes, they're thinking about their families, they're thinking about their friends. In some cases, they've had to leave their home. So it's not like they're getting back to work, in an hour after a disaster hits. So from a workforce perspective, some customers ask us, our closest SLA is 8 hours. And they kind of say, is that too long? And the reality is that from a workforce perspective, like I said, they're not going to get back to work instantly. So when we look at the DR solutions that are out there, in fact, most of them have an SLA of around 24 hours because they depend on physical units being shipped out or physical office space being provided to a customer, whereas ours is in the cloud. So that really means that we provide different types of SLAs into when the desktop capacity will be made available. So you can kind of mix and match across your workforce. Some users are more important than others. So I would probably say that that's kind of the biggest question that I've been getting.
Okay. We actually did get a question that came through. Let's see. It says, with respect to failover, failback automation, management of service or application dependencies, what tools or processes have been useful to assist, and how are service dependencies tested? It says someone mentioned vRealize Orchestrator. Hey, David, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so as for what services are tested, then ultimately that's based on your policies that you define as the customer. This solution is self-service. It's a case of you decide what workload you want to protect in disaster recovery, and then you protect them accordingly by deciding what kind of RPOs you want based on data change rates, how you want to automate it if you're going to use vRealize Orchestrator and those kind of things. As for, like Mike touched on the compliance side, from a cloud provider perspective, we're fully certified, and Mike mentioned a lot of the certifications. That's his strong point, not mine. So going on from how you actually define what a disaster is and how you protect those workloads, building out your run books is purely based on what scenarios you need as a business to recover. So some businesses, for example, are prepared to lose up to 24 hours data. They're prepared to have like a recovery time objective of 24 hours. They're prepared to be out for a day, making sure, in order to give their employees time to bring the services back online. Whereas some businesses, they need to be back online within 15 minutes, 30 minutes, because their data is critical to what their actual business needs are. If you think about businesses that are selling products on the internet, having their website go down can potentially cost them millions. So that kind of considerations are based on how you recover your solution. So when you're looking at kind of run books and how you're going to build out your scenarios, it's a case of understanding what the longest period of time you can be offline for. How are you going to recover those? So are you prepared to just manually go into the cloud and power on these virtual machines? If you've got 10 VMs, then going in and powering on 10 VMs yourself manually and clicking the failover button isn't that much of a big deal. If you've got 150, 500 virtual machines, then you need to consider how you're going to automate that and looking at how you can build that out with the vRealize Orchestrator plugin.
Great. There was a question that we do field a lot, David, around support for, I'll read the question. It says, could someone cover specific challenges with respect to services like DNS, AD, networking, databases, file sharing, etc., in terms of what was seen and how were or might these challenges be overcome. And I'm assuming this is obviously for vCloud Air DR.
Yeah. So first, the one thing I'll say is on the vCloud blog site, there's a number of blog articles that cover a lot of these topics. So if you go to blogs.vmware.com/vcloud, we have a number of blog articles that have been written by myself and my colleague Chris Colotti that cover a lot of scenarios around how you protect your infrastructure like Active Directory, DNS, what you do about like load balancing, how you access your resources in the event of a failure. So they're very much worth reading. On top of that, I'll actually walk you through it. So if you take Active Directory and DNS, for example, what's really interesting about that is anybody who's ever worked with any replication technology like vSphere replication or EMC's recover point or anything like that, or even SRM, they'll know that Active Directory doesn't replicate well. It has its own inbuilt replication, but what the challenge with Active Directory is it's all time-based and it's very time-sensitive. So if you were to replicate your domain controller at, say, 9:15, and then you replicate a member server at 9:17, and then you replicate your AD controller again at 9:30, but you don't re-replicate that member server, the tokens are out of sync. So in the event you fail over, all your timestamps for all your different virtual machines are out of sync. So it can become quite challenging when you're looking at it like that. So one of the options for Active Directory is you can leverage things like vCloud Air on demand, and you can actually spin up some VMs in the cloud and have put in like a VPN between your on-premises environment and the cloud environment, and actually build out a second site in Active Directory. If you think about what you're actually doing, you're essentially having a second data center for failover. There's no real difference in the considerations for your infrastructure when you're failing over to the cloud or you're failing over to a second data center that you own. The considerations are the same. So when you take Active Directory into account, you simply build some secondary domain controllers out in the cloud, configure Active Directory through sites and services to recognize this as a second site using different IP subnets, and then you configure VPN so you can actually replicate using Active Directory's inbuilt replication technologies between all your domain controllers. Then when you fail over, you simply authenticate locally using your DR VPC and your on-demand VPC. You put a VPN connection between them, and all your authentication is done locally in the cloud. So it becomes very, very simple to have your infrastructure running in the event of a failover. And with the on-demand as well aspects, you just get billed per minute for those VMs you're running. So you're not paying for large capacity that you're not using, you're simply paying for those virtual machines. And it becomes a lot simpler to look at, understand once you see the diagrams that are in those blog articles, but essentially it's just creating a second site and putting your Active Directory and DNS out there.
All right, that's great. Thanks, David, for answering the question. We had another just quick question, and I wanted to turn it back over to Skulk and Paul to chime in. Paul, I think you actually already touched on the fact that you, one of your criteria around testing from a frequency perspective was, I believe you said once a year. Yeah?
Quarterly.
Oh, quarterly. So even better. Okay, so quarterly. And Skulk, how about for the Hut group? How often are you guys needing to test or wanting to test your DR instance?
I would very much like to get to a quarterly test cycle, but right now we're at 6 months. So we're doing twice a year right now. But quarterly is definitely what I need to get to.
Great. And with the built-in test capability that enables you to test while replication is still running, I'm going to assume that makes both Paul and Skulk your jobs a lot easier with the solution, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we are coming up 2 minutes to the hour. I wanted to give, let's since you're since I'm looking at you right now. Do you have any parting words of advice or recommendations to the folks that have joined us in the Hangout today around, why cloud-based DR, and just from a disaster recovery perspective in general? Any parting words?
Yeah, sure. I think the one thing I would tell anybody is that you should have the end game in mind before you start out. Make sure you know how you want to fail over and what that looks like when you start doing it. I think David covered it quite nicely. Our setup is almost exactly the same. And we went down that road very specifically. We spent more time figuring out how we would do a failover and how it's going to work in that scenario than we did replicating the data. Replicating the data and getting it into a new location is easy. It's how you actually make that go live that you need to spend most of your time thinking about.
It's good. How about you, Paul?
No, I think that's well said. Mine would be simple. If you don't have a DR in place, I would implement vCloud Air, and you'll sleep better.
And with that, I just want to, again, thank you to our customers, Paul from Transact Payment Systems and from Sculpt from the HUD Group, as well as our in-house experts. We've got Mike, David, and Josue. Thank you all for joining us in today's Hangout. We hope you were able to learn a bit more about some of the cloud-based solutions from VMware, specifically from our vCloud Air and Horizon Air teams around disaster recovery. For more information on vCloud Air, I'm talking anything from data sheets, pricing overviews, tutorials, demos, please visit our microsite at vcloud.vmware.com. Again, that's vcloud.vmware.com. And for more information on Horizon Air, you can go to www.vmware.com/go/desktopdr. Hopefully that's pretty simple. It's vmware.com/go/desktopdr. And thanks, everybody. And with that, we're going to sign off.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.